Okay, now that you've had a look at the application process, it's helpful to talk about what you can do to prepare before you go and fill out your application. All right, we've got something called a work experience sheet, which will help you organize your hours into the required levels. So level 1, you can specify your projects. Level 2, you can specify what process groups you worked on and how many hours you worked within those process groups. And it will also then help you to organize down to level 3 the tasks that you worked on within those process groups. And that's very helpful to have on hand before you go and fill out your application. All right, now let's take a look at the spreadsheet that you can use to help break down your projects into the required initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, and controlling, and closing, and further break them down into the tasks. Well, let's start with the discussion about breaking down your projects, the level 1 breakdown, which is the projects that you worked on, the length of time that you worked on them, and the percentage. So let's take a look at this spreadsheet. In column A, we have a section for up to 5 projects, and default we have the yellow projects is the default name, the orange project, the green project, the purple project, and the blue project. You can put your own names in here for your own projects, but that's the default name. Let's take a look and see how we would enter our level 1 information. So let's say we worked during the year 2009, we worked on the yellow project. So we would come in here in the date column and put in 1/1/2009, and we worked on the whole year of 2009, so it'll be 1/1/2009 to 1/1/2010 is the way you'd have to enter it in this sheet. Note that the months are automatically calculated. So it automatically calculates 12 months. And now we're going to have to put a percentage that we worked on this project. Now let's say we were on the yellow project 100%. Okay, so there we go, 100%. And note that we now get the number of hours automatically calculated for us, that we get credit towards reaching our goal of 4,500 hours. And note that at the bottom here, it's going to add up and keep a running tally for you of how many hours you have as you enter each project. Now you'll have to keep entering projects until you get up to the 4,500 hours. Another thing to note is that the hours that are calculated are up here in the formula. You can change those. So this has 40 hours per week, assuming 4 weeks per month times the number of months. And we get, that's how we get to 1,920. Now, if you only work 35 hours per week, you could change this, of course, to 35, and it's going to give you a total of 1,680 hours. So really just depends on what you feel is reasonable for your projects. I'm going to go ahead and put this back to 40 for my example. Okay, and gives me 1,920. Okay, I'm going to have to keep adding projects because I'm only up to 1,920. So let's say I work, my next project was the orange project, and let's say I worked during the whole year of 2008 on that project. So I'll come here 1/1/2008, and I'll change column C to 1/1/2009, and that will give me 12 months. Now I have to put in a percentage. Well, I was only on the orange project for 50%, so I put 50%, and it calculates my hours. So it gives me 960 hours, and now I'm up to 2,880. Okay, so I'm going to have to keep going. So let's say I worked on the green project, and let's say I was on the green project for 2 years. All of 2007 and all of 2008. So let's start here 1/1/2007, and all the way up to 1/1, all of 2008, so 1/1/2009. Okay, and then that's going to give me a full 24 months of credit. And let's say I was 50%. Now note that the green project overlaps here 1 year with the orange project. But I only have 50% on the green project, so that's acceptable. So that gives me another 1,920 hours. And lo and behold, here we go. I have my greater than 4,500 hours. I actually have 4,800 hours. So now I can stop entering the level 1 projects and go on to level 2. Now note that I also have a calculated number of months. Now note that these number of months do not, the spreadsheet does not subtract out overlapping months. So in this case, it calculates 48 months, but when in fact I really only have 36 months. So just be aware that you might have to subtract out your overlap yourself. And we have 12 months overlap, so we'll have to subtract that out and come out with 36. But we know that that's okay. All right, now let's take a look at our level 2 number of hours, our level 2 breakdown. Now remember, you're going to be required to break down the number of hours you worked on a project into what PMI calls the 5 process groups, which are initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. So what this worksheet does is assume a default percentage in each one of these process groups. So for example, the spreadsheet assumes 10% spent on initiating, 25% on planning, 30% on executing, 25% on monitoring and controlling, and 10% on closing. And these are just averages. You can change these, no problem. But what the spreadsheet does is, based on those percentages, it calculates the number of hours that you spent on that project in that process group. So for example, 10% of 1,920 for the yellow project is 192 hours. 25% of the 1920 is 480 hours. 30% is 576. 25% again is 480, and 10% again is 192. Now, if you didn't work these percentages, or let's say you didn't work on initiating at all, so you had no initiating, let's change that to 0, but you spent more time in executing. So let's change that to 40. Okay, now we see we still add up to 100%. We still have a total of 1,920 hours, but allocated a little bit differently. Now, for the level 2 breakdown, you can go through each one of your projects and you can go and reallocate the hours, but make sure that your percentages add up to 100% and allocate to roughly as close as you can to what you actually did before you go on to the next step. Okay, now that we have our level 1 and level 2 breakdown, we're going to go to the next tab on the spreadsheet, which is called Detail. And you can see these projects, the yellow, the orange, the green, purple, and blue, will all be carried over for you onto the next detail sheet. However, they'll be laid out vertically instead of horizontally. Now, remember that for the yellow project, we had 1,920 hours, and that's carried over to the next sheet. For the orange, we had 960, that's carried over, and for the green we had 1,920, and that's carried over. Now, if you'll note, our level 2 is also carried over. So for initiating, for the yellow, remember we changed it to 0, so we had 0 hours. For the orange project, we didn't change it, and we have 96 hours for initiating, and for green we have 192 hours. Now that for the PMI application, you're going to have to break down initiating into the 5 tasks. And note that the spreadsheet also has default percentages to break down the number of hours into these specific tasks. So let's take a look at the orange project as an example for initiating. We carried over 96 hours from the previous spreadsheet from our level 2 breakdown. We know that we spent 96 hours on initiating, but now we have to allocate the 96 hours to the 5 tasks. So note that the spreadsheet has a default of 20%, so it just allocates the number of hours evenly across the 5 tasks. Now what you can do is come in here again and adjust those percentages. So the first question is conduct project selection methods to evaluate the feasibility of new products or services. Now let's say instead of spending 20% on that, you spent only 10% on that. Okay. Now when you change that, your percentages add up to only 90%. So you're going to have to change something else, and let's say task number 3, define the scope of the project based on the organizational need to meet the customer project, and let's say you actually spent 30% of your time on that. So we change that. It still adds up to 100%, and note that next to each percentage in red is a number of hours. So these hours in red are the actual hours that you would enter in the PMI application. And that's what you need to fill out the application. So you would go through the same process for each project. In this case, you have the yellow, orange, and green project. You have initiating, planning, the same thing, except for the default percentages are based on 6 tasks. So we have roughly 17%, or 1/6 of the number of hours allocated. We have executing, where we have 8 tasks allocated, so we have roughly 1/8 or 13%. And monitoring and controlling, we have 4 tasks, so we would have roughly 25%. And for closing, we have 7 tasks, or roughly 1/7 or 14%. So again, you would come in here and adjust these as necessary, or use the default percentages. But the numbers in red are the numbers that you need for the PMI application, and the numbers in blue here are the numbers carried over from the level 2 calculation from the first sheet. But overall, you can see that the spreadsheet makes it much easier for you to think about the number of hours that you've spent on each one of these tasks, which is quite difficult to really get that organized without a sheet like this. So I encourage you to download this sheet, and we also have some instructions. If you don't recall what I'm telling you here, just go through the instructions step by step, fill out the level 1, the level 2, and level 3. Either print it out or save it, and you'll be all set when you go to actually fill out your application. So good luck to you, and thank you very much. And one final reminder, now that you know how to prepare to fill out your application, when you're ready, go over to www.pmi.org and click around. Let me show you what that looks like. So when you log in to PMI.org, this is what you'll get. This is their home page. You'll need to, if you haven't registered yet, you'll have to click here and register. And then once you complete the registration process, you'll have to come down here to get certified. And that'll lead you through the process of filling out the application. So again, good luck to you, and hope to see you in a PMP boot camp. Thank you.